Hey, happy Wine
Happy
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, Canadian wine lovers, Carl's Wine Club members. Here you go. It's happy hour. Wednesday wine happy hour. Here we are. This is Vineland Estates Winery Week. Yeah, what a cool pack that we have here this week. It's pretty exciting because I know that we have someone pretty special, someone pretty cool in the green room waiting for us to bring him in. So, Bushri, how are you doing today?
Great, great. I have to show everyone my shirt. It says Je suis avec Carl. But
There
they
you
misspelled your
go.
name.
See?
I found out at the
Represent.
store. I was like, gosh, they spelled Carl's name wrong.
Represent. I love
Yeah.
it. Carl's Wine Club. We are here. No, Mira's at soccer because it's Wednesday soccer for the kids. So we're going to start the show. Mira's going to join us around 5:30 time. I'm pretty sure that she's going to zip pretty quick back home because I know that she's very excited to ask questions to our very special guest tonight. So we have Brian Schmidt.
Yes, and let's just be honest here too. I'm also very excited about the wine he made that we get to taste. This bad boy.
Hey, it's right in here. It's right in here.
Yeah.
I had a sip already. I have a sip already home.
So you bet I'll be coming
about
home from soccer very fast.
It's all about richness, concentration. Like it's been lingering for over a minute right now, so it's just like.
So I missed the first sip.
You sure? Yeah. There was the count. It was the countdown. I stood up on my chair. I was like, whoa.
Because Carl can't help the way he reacts, so you always know what he thinks of the wine based on the first sip. Dang it.
Yeah, you missed it.
Right.
Unless you can layer off the countdown and see what my camera was showing.
Thankfully, I can't.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool week. So Vineland Estate, I remember having a conversation with Marcel Morgenstern last year when we were prepping Cabernet Franc, and Marcel called me up and said, have you ever talked with Brian Schmidt? And I was like, no, I know who he is, but I've never talked to him. He's like, okay, wait a minute. If you do something around Cabernet Franc, you never talk with Brian Schmidt. Like, come on, like you need to up your game here at Bushri. So anyhow, we had the chance through in the last maybe 6 months to get in contact and to put something together for this week. So this week it's Vineland Estate Week at Carl's Wine Club. And you know what's like, for me, it's easy to taste $50, $60, $70 wine and say, oh, these wines are so good. Oh yeah, I guess so, because like at that price point, you expect outstanding wines, right? But when I get a part of the lineup or a part of the portfolio that absolutely blows my socks off, absolutely shatter my expectation at a price point under $20, that's where I'm starting to see like, wow, okay, these guys, like they have something for everyone, and that's what we're looking for. And oh my, holy moly. Remember when we tasted the Vineland? This one, the 2020 Vineland on Oak Chardonnay. Remember when we tasted it the first time?
Who were we with? We were with two other members, I think.
We were with, I think it was with Karen Chapman.
Was it with Karen and Jan? Or was it with Clay and, yeah, it was Karen and Jan. And we were all like, oh, this is really good. Oh, it's great. No, it might have just been us for that one.
That was
we were
yeah,
just for the Pinot Meuniers, yeah. But for that one, I remember I was like, okay, Carl, how much is this wine? And he's like, what did you say? Like,
well, I say if it's under $25, I'm super happy because it shows really, really, really good. Under 25, I'll be blown away. I'm going to give it a 91 points. And you started to laugh.
Well, yeah, because Carl is rarely off by more than a few dollars. Like he's got this uncanny ability to just take a sip of something and say, that's probably this much. And then it'll be like within $2 to $3 max of what he said. And so then I was like, under 25, I was like, try again. He's like, I don't know, under 22. And I'm like, try again. And it's a $14.95 including.
Yeah. And like you know, guys, I always rate the wines with the price in mind because I think it's a huge part of like I said, like a 91 points wine, but I think it deserves more if it's like half the price than a wine at $40. So yes, I give it a 92. What this is like, this is the value wine of the year. I don't think there's any contest so far. We're mid-May and there's nothing close. And I'll challenge a lot of winemaker around the country to give me something better for $14.95. Oh my God. So yeah, well-rounded portfolio. The new elevation cabs that we tasted a couple nights ago, off the chart as well, just showing even better the second and the third night. This one has such an amazing structure. And when we're talking Pinot Meunier, so like who in the country regularly drink single varietal Pinot Meunier? Oh yeah, try again. No one does that. So we have Pinot Meunier from the exceptional 2020 vintage. We have it single vineyard, single clone red wine. That is something exclusive, like super unique. And the sparkling rosé. We brought that sparkling rosé to Clay and Joanna, who run BC Wine Reviews, and these guys were absolutely blown away by that wine. So I think I have a feeling that's going to become
the price point. That was another one where we went around the table and everyone guessed a higher price than what that is.
But this one, I know that Clay guessed $45 and Joanna guessed $40, and like this is $30 tax in. So Pinot Meunier sparkling rosé, this become the Bushri official bubbles of the summer at the lake here in Kelowna. Yeah. So
well, you know what? Brian is here. I got to go get the kids from soccer. I will be back while you're tasting that delicious 2016. I bet it's delicious because I know that you had an expressive first sip, which means something good in your glass. So let's bring Brian in. I'll hop out and we'll see you guys in a little bit.
Thank you, Mira. Drive safe. Don't drive too fast. Don't drive too fast, okay? Stay safe. Well, I'm sure I'm going to save some wine for you.
Because the glass.
Hey, Brian Schmidt is in the house. Brian, good evening.
Hey guys, how are you? So I've just had a remarkable day here. It's a little after 8 o'clock at night where we are in the east in Ontario, and by virtue of the fact that we're going to have this tasting here tonight, I was able to stay in the vineyard a little bit later and get a little bit more work done. It's absolutely gorgeous out there right now. It's about 20 degrees, so I got lots of sun today. I came in, I gave myself a sponge bath, got all the dust and the dirt off of me. I changed my shirt, I don't stink like sweat. And so you got me now. I'm at my best.
That's awesome. And you know what's help you, I would say, to be at your best? It's what's behind you, because where you're at right now looks absolutely spectacular. And I want to tell our guests here, our members who are watching, this is not a virtual background. This is the real one. Where are you, Brian, right now?
This is I'm in our barrel cellar right now. This is at the end of our barrel cellar. We have just a collection of wines from the past. We've got some interesting wines. This is a good example, 1998. It probably shows up backwards on your background.
Oh my God.
1998 Meritage. So just some of the great vintages that we've been able to enjoy here at Vineland Estates. We have a small collection of them here that people can enjoy when they come down and take a look at it. And it's just a piece of our history. I love being here.
Wow. Hey, talking about the piece of history. So I just want to introduce you properly, Brian. Brian Schmidt, if we look on your website, you're the vice president and the winemaker of Vineland Estates Winery. So before, because I really want to talk about your family history, Brian, you were born in the Okanagan. So, and according to my research, it might be like on the St. Hubertus vineyard on the eastern side of Kelowna. Is it correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So a really interesting story. My grandfather, originally, I don't want to talk about the horrible things that are happening in the Ukraine right now, but our family was extricated from the Ukraine in the early 1900s. They made their way to Saskatchewan when my grandfather was 16 years old. He hopped on a train and went out west and began working for a family in Kelowna. He landed there in Kelowna and worked for this man for quite a number of years. And for every year that he worked for him, he was granted the opportunity to buy 10 acres of land. At the time, it was so far out of the urban boundary, it was totally inconsequential to the man that he was going to buy it from. Kelowna grew and extended and extended and extended. And eventually he was able to buy 170 acres of grapes, which is now home to St. Hubertus Winery, and it's changed hands several times in there. But I was born on that vineyard on the shores of Okanagan Lake in Kelowna, and it's just if you know where the mission is, the vineyard is originally called Okanagan Mission Vineyards, and it was the largest vineyards in Canada at the time, largest vineyards in British Columbia. So that's pretty amazing. So my grandfather had that property. My father was born there. My brother, myself, my sister, and that's where we all started from.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Oh yeah, you moved to Summerland, and there was rumor that you and your dad, or I think it's probably you were involved with Harry McWhorter at the very beginning of Sumac Ridge, and where the BC wine industry really started to take form, right?
Well, the BC wine industry didn't really exist. This was in late 1970s, and Harry McWhorters and my father were working at Casabella Wines in Penticton, and they both had this dream. They said, we're going to start up what at that time was the second estate winery in the Okanagan, or in BC, to be started. The first one was a winery called Claremont Estates. They were the second estate winery to start. They opened up Sumac Ridge. We took an existing vineyard. We converted 3 of the fairways into vineyards, extended the balance of the fairways, and had a golf course. We had a restaurant there at the time. And it was really before its time. Nobody ever thought that you could have a restaurant and a golf course and a winery all on one site. Nobody thought that was even possible in Canada at the time. But Harry and my dad did that. Harry, God rest his soul, passed away. My father passed away as well in the same year. And they're toasting each other right now, wherever they happen to be. And looking down on their children. Crystalie and Darian McWhorters are still in Time Winery, and my brother and myself out here. So yeah, pretty amazing history. I'm really proud of it.
That's pretty cool, because we do a lot of stuff with Times Winery. We featured them 2 weeks ago, actually,
right.
And we have Crystalie with us quite often. And we're going to do international World Chardonnay Day in a couple weeks. And I don't
mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I'm going to send you a picture of the very first wine Crystalie and I ever made. And there's a picture of us. Both of us are maybe 12, maybe 13 years old. It's a carboy of wine. And that's the very first time we ever made wine. I've got that.
I know. She told us the story before. I thought it was really, really cool. And there's a gentleman named Jim Bagnan who used to distribute the wine for you guys for Sumac at early stage. And Jim told me a story about you and Crystalie at a very young age. I was like, oh, that is really darn cool. I tried to have Crystalie to come on my panel to taste all of these beautiful Chardonnay for World Chardonnay Day with me. So,
great.
But she lives in Summerland, and it's on a Saturday. So I was like, why don't put a panel together and we can go live from the backyard? And and now I think we are up to 42 different Chardonnays that we're going to have for that day. So it's going to be a heck of a Chardonnay celebration. I'm pretty excited.
Who's sponsoring the oysters?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty good. So from you guys, so now you and your dad were involved with Sumac Ridge. And how did you make and when did you guys make the decision to move from, because I've seen that quite often, people moving from Ontario coming to the Okanagan for a change of career, but backward, it's a very unique move. So when did you make the decision?
Yeah, well, everybody kind of felt our forehead and saying, like, are you all right? Are you sick? What are you doing? You moved from BC to here? What's wrong with you? So, Carl, you have to remember in the Okanagan Valley at the time, the early 1980s, a small startup winery that was making 10 or 12,000 cases of wine. My family and the McWhorters family were pretty heavily leveraged. There was a horrible recession in the early 1980s where interest rates were up around 21 or 22%. And it probably could not have been the worst time to start up a new venture where 2 families went in debt to the tune of a couple $1 million. And it really was a real struggle for our families, for the McWhorters family and our family. I spoke about it. I spoke at Harry McWhorters' celebration of life, and I talked a little bit about it then, just kind of the struggles that all the families, these 2 families had. And so the partnership dissolved in 1986, and I was actually a commercial scuba diver at the time. I said to myself, I'm out of here. I don't want anything to do with the Canadian wine industry. I went off to Vancouver Island and I was a commercial scuba diver for 4 years. My brother, Alan, through a connection that our family had, knew the Weiss family from Germany. My father had been importing his grapevines from Germany for quite a number of years. Herman Weiss bought the property here. And when we sold our interests at Sumac Ridge and dissolved the partnership, but still maintain the friendship. And that's really important that our friendship has remained incredibly close. And Crystal and Darian are very dear to me. But when the partnership dissolved, my father expanded his vine importation business. And at the time, the Ontario was a little bit more prolific in terms of how many grapes were being grown and the potential for the wine industry. So my father moved out to Ontario. My brother moved out to Ontario, began working here at Vineland Estates 36 years ago, I think it was, for the Weiss family who owned it in Germany. And so our family took care of it for the Weiss family. And then eventually I found out as I was on the West Coast in BC as a commercial scuba diver, as I said, I realized I was more mortal than I thought I was and had a couple of near-death experiences and said, this is it, I'm done, I don't want to do this, this is crazy. My father convinced me to come out here and said, just come for harvest, your brother needs help. And my father, in the wisdom that he always had, this quiet, humble wisdom, knew that I would come out here and I would stay. So that was this now 32 years later. So my brother and I still run the winery together now.
Ah, that is so cool. So that's how the decision has been made to move over. That's pretty cool. So the Vineland was established, what, early 1990?
So the very first vines were planted in 1979.
Okay.
We're still growing those grapes. We celebrated the 40th anniversary of the vines being put in the ground with taking 140 of our wine club members here to Mecca, to Germany, where we celebrated the 40th anniversary at St. Urbanshof. And the winery here, and the vineyard here is called St. Urbans. You'll see it on the elevation label. St. Urbanshof, they've allowed us to continue to use that name for our vineyards, but we celebrated our 40th anniversary with 140 wine club members live in Germany with Nick Weiss and Herman Weiss. So it was pretty amazing.
That is very, very special, because when we talk about history, and I don't think like Germany, Marcel was there in Germany a couple weeks ago, and once a day I had these pictures coming up to my inbox.
Oh, it was driving me crazy. I got the same pictures. Like, just stop it. Come on.
I know. Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, we're trying to get some stuff done here.
Building. Good for you.
Yeah, try to get some stuff done around here. Can you please stop? Yeah, no, great experience to take the members out there. Wow. So I want to know a little bit about the growth of the estate, because you guys went at the beginning in about early 1980s when the estate started. You guys started with how many cases production compared to where you're at now?
So our very first production was in 1983 when the vines were planted. And you have to remember, Herman Weiss planted these vines not with the intention of making a winery. He wanted to be able to convince Ontario grape growers at the time that you could indeed grow Riesling grapes. They were growing grapes that were making not particularly wonderful wines then in the 1970s or so. And he believed in Canada. He believed that there was a tremendous amount of potential here. And so he bought this property, planted the grapes here. And in many respects, this is kind of the epicenter of Riesling in Canada, the St. Urban Vineyard. Some of the very first Riesling vines were planted. At the same time, Cave Spring Cellars was planting some Riesling as well. And so our very first vintage was 1983. It wasn't made here. There wasn't a winery. It didn't exist. We just had an old barn, essentially. It was made at a winery just down the road, which is now home to Cave Spring Cellars. And there's only a couple thousand cases were made in the first year. So for the first year, a couple thousand cases, just like every other winery in Canada at the time, we grew organically, another 1,000 cases each year. When I joined Vineland Estates in 1991, we were producing about 8,000 cases of wine per year. Our max at one particular year in 1997 was around 60,000 cases. And we've dialed that back. We found a sweet spot for ourselves. We're around 40,000 cases now.
And probably what you're exporting half of it, or what?
Pre-COVID, we were exporting more, not more than half for sure. But now our exports, just like everybody else, have more or less dried up. But our export business, we've been fairly attentive to ensuring that we don't put too many eggs in one basket. So LCBO is about 20 or 25%, licensee 20 or 25%, export 20 or 25%, and then on-site around 20 or 25%. But the most rewarding for us is when people come and visit us here on our property, drive up the driveway. It's stunningly beautiful. I drive up this every single day, this driveway, and think how blessed I am to be here. And that's really what we're here for. We want people to come and visit us here, enjoy the hospitality, enjoy the wines, enjoy the scenery, be transported somewhere else, and then take that memory back home wherever they live.
It's soaking into the experience, right? There's nothing else than being in the vineyard or being at the winery to have the feeling and to have I think the sensory experience is much greater when you're on site. That's for sure.
Yeah, at one point somebody was saying that Niagara was beginning to be Napa of the North, and I said, no, Napa is Niagara of the South.
I was having a conversation with Ross Wise, master of wine, winemaker at Blackhill Estates,
yeah, he's a great
last year, and I said, Ross, do you agree with me that probably our Syrah here in the Okanagan is probably like maybe the third best in the world? He said, what are you talking about? We are the best in the world.
Good for him.
He's like, we're way better than the Rhone Valley and certainly way better than Australia. So please switch that around. And no, we're not the third best. We're the first best. So, yeah.
I'm hoping that Etienne Giguel is not listening to this because I'll be getting a message from him saying, what the heck are you talking about?
What is he talking about? Yeah, you know what? La Turque is, yeah, okay, yes, I will say, okay, Côte de Blonde.
That's funny.
So you have an extensive history of traveling to France. I was following a little bit your post about the barrel program that you were posting a couple months ago. You took us to some beautiful place in France. Can you please tell our people, like, what is some of the most amazing place that you visited down in Bordeaux and in France?
Oh my gosh, they're all amazing. So the world itself the wine world is full of really wonderful people, very gregarious people, very outgoing. Most people in the wine industry are open, they're welcoming, and that's kind of a common theme wherever you go in the wine industry, whether I happen to be in Germany or France or Italy or Switzerland or England, wherever it happens to be, where they grow grapes. There's just sort of this natural sense of hospitality. And so what I would say the most impressive thing for me with the wineries that I visited in France is not necessarily the wineries, although there's so much entrenched history in these beautiful wineries, and the stories that are in these bottles is quite remarkable. It's always about the people. It's the people that you meet that really resonate. And so we've had some pretty remarkable opportunities to meet some amazing people. I would tell you that one of my greatest friendships and greatest, most rewarding friendship is with a man that supplied us wine barrels initially, then tanks, then yeasts, then bottles, and he started this small sort of little nascent export business in France and started selling products to Canada. He was actually from Quebec, lived in Quebec for a period of time. His name is Alain Girard, and I would say that all of the greatest wine experiences that I've had was in part due to Alain's connections throughout France. And so I owe all of my greatest memories to him. I still connect with him on a weekly basis. We send pictures of food back and forth to each other. And so, gosh, I can't tell you one particular place, but I can tell you that visiting Clos Rougeard for me was probably, in terms of my own professional career, visiting Clos Rougeard and meeting Charlie Foucault before he passed away, unfortunately, that was probably my North Star. That was if I was to take one single moment that was the aha moment for me as a winemaker, it was being at Clos Rougeard. Such a humble place, when you don't even, there's no beautiful building. It's just a door. That's all it is a little door, and you walk into this world of unbelievable quality and the sense of history. It's just remarkable. So I would tell you that meeting Charlie Foucault was probably one of my greatest wine experiences ever. Such a humble man, such a joyful man. We literally tasted every single barrel in his wine cellar, and each one he had a story about where the grapes were grown, and he had a story about his father, he had a story about his brother, he had a story about his son, and we spent like 6 hours. Afterwards, we went into his house and enjoyed a meal with his wife. His son is now got his own small winery, Domaine de Collier, I believe is the name of the winery, and probably find some of those wines somewhere. But I would have to tell you that was probably my favorite. But there's been a ton.
Yeah, definitely. Wine is all about people and place, right? That's why it's make this the most beautiful and gratifying industry that we're doing. We've been seeing such a a growth in our Canadian wine industry right now. Like it's over 850 wines. We're going to do our first Nova Scotia offer coming up with a wine from Annapolis Valley coming up in June. There's so many great things happening on Vancouver Island. We see some great little estate growing in Quebec. We see Prince Edward County, Lake Erie North Shore, and here in BC we have the Similkameen. The quality of every single of these small regions are so outstanding. My question to you is, what do you think is the greatest asset in both of these main regions, like Ontario versus Okanagan? Like what would make the biggest difference in these two wine regions? Because I got that so often from members. Carl, why should I buy wines from Ontario? Or when Ontario people will send us an email, oh, why should I buy wine from BC when we have the best wine here? My answer would be like, oh yeah, but diversity. But like, what's the biggest asset in both regions?
Yeah. So what I would tell you first of all is the one common theme between all of the wine regions of Canada, and you mentioned all of them. Lillooet, they're growing grapes in Lillooet. It's unbelievable.
Oh, we had to drive. Oh, I have to stop you. We had to drive, Mira and I, last summer. From the Okanagan all the way to Lillooet, 3.5, 4 hours. One of the most outstanding drive than we ever had. Oh, what a day to get there! And it's just like if you like driving, it's just such a beautiful experience.
I recently read a book about the history of California wines, and it talks about some of the wine regions that were established in the mid 1800s or so. And there's this small little area just north of the Mexican border, where the history itself of California wine started, and it was this backwater. There was like nothing about this place that said this is going to be one of the greatest wine regions in the world. And you look at Lillooet, and that's a really good example. Nobody knows that Lillooet is the hottest place in Canada. It's unbelievable. And so what I would say, though, the difference, to answer your question, first of all, if I wasn't in Ontario, I would be in Nova Scotia. My wife and I just recently bought our own little vineyard that we're going to be building a house on and retiring someday when I'm 95 years old. But because I have a granddaughter now, and so our family is all here. But if we didn't have those ties, I probably would be in Nova Scotia. I think it is one of the most remarkable, encouraging, enthusiastic wine regions in Canada. They have so much potential there. Their sparkling wines are unrivaled, really, quite frankly, in the world. You talked about Benjamin Bridge earlier.
Oh, Benjamin Bridge. When I was with WestJet and we built a WestJet, I was doing the whole wine program for WestJet for 5 years. When they bought their 10U jetliner, and he asked me to build the business side, where the first one that we called was Benjamin Bridge for the welcome sparkling on board of the business program. Unbelievable sparkling wine.
Yeah, and they have such a sense of pride there. And you look at what Lightfoot and Wolfville is doing. Their daughters went to school here, and we know them very, very well. And so it's a pretty colloquial industry, and everybody in Canada kind of knows each other.
Do you know the Stotts? Do you know the
2 degrees of separation between all of us?
Do you know the Stotts family? I think that yeah. Oh, exactly. I talked with the old man a couple months ago, and now I'm in contact with Cecilia and the daughters. So Domaine des Grands Prés, it's pretty cool what they're doing.
Exactly.
I just started to taste their wine.
With his Swiss background, he's a pretty remarkable guy.
Yeah, I think he was at the forefront of the Tidal Bay appellation.
He absolutely, yeah, for sure. Well, them and Luckett Vineyards and Peter Gamble played a big role in that as well. Peter Gamble has helped out the Nova Scotia wine industry a lot. You would know Peter Gamble, Anne Sperling's husband. Anne Sperling was Sperling Vineyards in BC. So
yes, exactly.
It's pretty incestuous. It's all kind of intertwined. But to answer your question, Ontario and British Columbia, I would say the primary difference is heat units. When you look at the southern Okanagan, and where the vast majority of all the grapes that are grown in terms of acreage in the southern Okanagan, you just have more heat units, and you can ripen grapes like Syrah a little bit more generosity, a little bit more weight, a little bit more depth. It can handle winemaker manipulation a little bit more in terms of things like oak treatment and whatnot. So you can add layers to the wine without really interfering with the terroir. Once you move further north into around where St. Hubert was, our former family winery, and even further up into Lake Country where, say, Grey Monk was, it completely changes and it becomes more like Ontario. So even to say what is it, you could ask the same question: what is North Okanagan and South Okanagan? What's the difference between the two? And I would probably tell you that the difference between Ontario and British Columbia is the same as the difference between North Okanagan and Southern Okanagan.
Certain years we're talking about over 500 unit degree day difference.
Exactly,
like from 850 to 1350. This is a huge difference for an hour and a half drive.
Yeah, for sure. But what I would tell you, the biggest difference for me in terms of the British Columbia wine industry and the Ontario wine industry, quite frankly, and I don't want to get into politics, but is the politics around the taxation and how the British Columbia government supports the British Columbia wine industry, and the consumers of British Columbia wines are stalwart. They believe in British Columbia wines and they have a fervent love of it. And I would say in Ontario we're not quite there. We still have a consumer who is not ambivalent about Ontario wines, but there's so much selection in the LCBO. And so we don't have that same degree of connectivity and love for our own industry that's in our backyard. I would say that the people from Quebec love Ontario wine more than Ontarians love Ontario wine.
Yeah, you're so right about I don't know if it's protective is the right term, but the way that BC people believe and purchase BC wine, it's unparalleled across the country. I lived in Alberta for so long, and I keep hearing like this is something real, how BC people believe in what they're doing. It's the best. Sometimes it's almost annoying, but but I have to tip my hat at
I would love to be so annoyed by our customers.
Yeah.
You love us so much. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. And but definitely like the cold climate of Ontario, where like the Chardonnay shine, the Riesling. We just did Riesling Day in February, and it became obvious. Obviously, we had some great bottlings from BC, like Synchromèche. It's produced some outstanding Rieslings. We have some great Riesling producer, but when you look at the big pictures, holy moly, that what's coming from Ontario is spectacular. We're talking world class, and we're talking like it can go easily head to head with the German, with the Alsatians. There's such a style also that you can pinpoint the Ontario acidity.
Yeah, it's all about the acidity for us. And when you look at even the history of Ontario wines, that seam of acidity has woven its way through the entire history of Ontario wines, and that has never wavered. And so winemakers have 20, 30, 40 years ago were really struggling to try to find a way to contend with and to cope with that acidity, because the consumers were just not ready to accept it. And we now see that with certain thoughtful winemaking processes, with the understanding of residual sugar in wines, and creating this yin-yang balance, sort of the sweet-sour balance, and not being afraid of having a small amount of residual sugar in our Rieslings has made all the difference in the world. If we had to produce all of our Rieslings in a dry format, in a conventional world, acceptable terms of dry, kind of under 7 grams per liter, you'd be drinking battery acid. It just wouldn't happen. And so people have really wrapped their heads around the notion of accepting wines with a little bit of residual sugar and to balance off that acidity. And that's really what Ontario is now.
That's truly the Ontarian style. That's truly that's truly Ontario style. You're so right. And it's so defined. Hey, because when we read a little bit more about you, when we follow what the Vineland Estates are doing, what draw you towards Cabernet Franc? Because this is one of your passion. You love working with Cabernet Franc. You can taste it. When we taste your Cab Franc, we can feel there's something special in there. Where that love for Cab Francs comes from?
So it's interesting. I sleep, dream, and eat Cab Franc. I honestly do. It is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It is the alpha and the omega. It is what I love. And you're absolutely correct. I'm more than passionate. I'm obsessed about it. And so where did that come from? So you have to remember, when I was when I was growing up and we were making wine in Sumac Ridge, my understanding of red wine at that time in the 1970s and 1980s was Chancellor. I don't even know if you've had to suffer through drinking any Chancellor in your time.
I was born in '76. I'm Montreal Olympic game year kids. Okay.
Oh, so there you go. So there's a grape variety that was grown in the late 1970s and early 1980s in the Okanagan Valley called Chancellor. And quite frankly, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. And so as a kid, I remember tasting these wines, my father bringing them home and having them at our table and thinking to myself, why in God's name would anybody drink this shit? I don't understand it. I hate it. It was kind of like Molson's beer. Yeah. So I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying that. And so when I came to Ontario in 1991, one of the first things that we did, there was this big celebration called Knives and Forks. And it was a fundraiser for a cooking school. And so we're at Cave Springs Vineyards, and all around the vineyard, scattered all around the outskirts of the vineyard were tables. There'd be a restaurant and a winery, and people would walk all around this. And it was this whole day at experiencing, tasting wines and eating these amazing foods. Beside the Vineland Estates table was a man named Ed Garinskas. I'm going to tell you more about him later. But Ed Garinskas is a former CN Rail employee who bought a little vineyard just around the corner from Vineland Estates. He and his wife started planting some grapes, and he was driving back and forth from Ottawa to tend to his grapes. And he made a Cabernet Franc in 1990 that I tasted in 1991. That was the very first red wine that ever, not as you said earlier, knocked my socks off. I couldn't believe it. I was like, now I understand it. This is why people like red wine. I get it. It's not that crap that we were drinking when I was 17, 18 years old, and I was stealing from my mom and dad's wine cellar.
If you compare to Matousse, like was it better than Matousse?
Matousse is pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not bad anymore. So anyways, it was Ed Garinskas that made this wine, and he's trying to explain to me the merits of growing grapes in Ontario, and he's trying to explain to me how he made the wine. But all I could think of was, this is just unbelievably good. It was so tasty. I can still taste it now, 32 years later. And it was in that moment, it formed my love for Cabernet Franc. And I began to explore. I began to just seek Cabernet Francs wherever I went. And I wanted to learn more about it, and I wanted to grow it. And finally, in 1996, we planted our boutique vineyard, and we put Cabernet Franc in those vines. And so it was that seminal moment, tasting Ed Garinskas' Cabernet Franc from 1990 that he had made that made all the difference for me. Fast forward quite a number of years, Ed Garinskas sold his little vineyard and winery. He sold it to Diamond Estates. Diamond Estates then sold it to Taw's Winery, and it's more of a production facility. They kept the brand Lakeview Cellars. Diamond Estates still has that. But Ed Garinskas moved just 200 or 300 yards away in a little home with a tiny little vineyard, a couple of acre vineyard, that he's been living there quietly, just enjoying his retirement. And that is the vineyard that my wife and I just purchased. So we just purchased it last year. He's still living there. And so I now have those vines in our possession. And where I was tonight, I mentioned that I was in the vineyard before I came here. I was on that vineyard, and I was doing some work in our own little vineyard. And I actually chatted with Ed Garinskas, and he's still a dear, dear friend of mine. I love him with all my heart. And I thank him every single day for setting me on that path of Cabernet Franc in 1991.
Oh, right. Now you ended up to have these vines in your possession. That is that is pretty darn cool.
That's
wow.
amazing.
And where does that journey took you? Like, obviously, we cannot talk about Cabernet Franc around the world without talking about the Loire Valley.
Yeah.
This is probably the Mecca of Cabernet Franc. So what's a little bit the process? Where did you go in your journey of Cabernet?
So it was all just opportune moments. Oftentimes I was traveling to Europe for trade shows that we'd have to go to, or equipment shows, whatever happened to be. And I would take 2 or 3 extra days. And with my friend that I mentioned before, Alain Gerard, we would just go drive somewhere. We spent a lot of time in Burgundy. We spent a lot of time in Beaujolais. We spent a lot of time in the Rhone. We spent a lot of time in Provence. And we spent a lot of time in the Loire. He has a dear friend, his cousin, lives in the Loire. We would stay with him, and we'd have these amazing meals. And the next day we would travel around, and we'd taste wines all around the Loire with people that he knew. His name is Philip, and Philip knew almost everybody in the Loire. And so we had this opportunity to meet these unbelievable winemakers who were just so humble and so gracious. We would go in and taste wine on these stone slabs, or in some abbey that was built in the 12th century, or it was just this humble experience. And so it was there that probably cemented my love for the grape and for Cab Franc and for the expressive nature of Cabernet Franc. And more important, expressive, but more versatility. It is one of the most versatile grape varieties that you can imagine. When you look at the range of wines and the potential styles that it makes, unbelievably versatile. These remarkable sparkling wines that are made in the Loire from Cabernet Franc, unbelievable rosés, light, fresh bistro wines that you have for lunch in a little mug in some bistro in a corner of some 300-year or 3,000-year-old road in France, or these unbelievably rich and opulent Cabernet Franc. So it's unbelievably versatile. So that's really what captured my attention. And so being in the Loire gave me some sense of the potential. What can we do with this grape variety? It's not just a red wine. It has so much possibility. And that really is the key for a new world wine region, to be able to take a grape and make it its own. We have to be versatile. We have to be adaptive, and we have to be able to learn how to work within the growing conditions of the seasons and make a wine that is representative of that growing season, not concern ourselves so much with trying to shove it into a box that says this is our Cabernet Franc is always going to be rich and luscious and unctuous and intense. It's just not how it works. You have to follow the growing conditions. You have to follow the vintages. And that's what I learned in the Loire. And having spoken with hundreds of winemakers in the Loire, you just have to learn how to be malleable. You have to be versatile. And that's really, so versatile grapes, versatile wines, versatile winemakers.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Loire weather in the Loire, not the terroir, but let's say the growing season, it's fairly similar of what you guys got in Ontario, right? It's not that far apart.
Absolutely, yeah, very similar issues with humidity that we have here in Ontario. There's lots of humidity issues in lots of cool, damp mornings in the Loire. We have the same thing here. So yeah, there are a lot of tremendous similarities for sure. What we don't have is that chalk tuffeau soil that you see throughout. We don't have that. We've got this limestone clay with limestone substrate, which is probably more like right bank Bordeaux than it is the Loire. So we're kind of we've sort of moved ourselves right in the middle of the Loire and Bordeaux.
In the right bank, yes, yeah, you're right. So a couple questions here about vintages, because 2020 was talking to many people in Ontario. Some will say the vintage of the century. Some will say one of the best vintage we've seen. So I'm tasting tonight 2016. It was known for a warm vintage. So what I'm having here, it's luscious, it's ripe, it's concentrated, it's a dense wine. And often also I will taste something from the same region from you guys with a different vintage, like 2017 example, the year after. The wines are such an expression of the vintage, especially with Cabernet Franc. And so what is the couple vintage that comes back to mind for you at Vineland, where you can say it was some of our top vintage?
So again, you really hit the nail on the head. You have to kind of ask yourself, what is it that you're looking for in Cabernet Franc in terms of the expression of wine? Are you looking for something with a lot of alcohol, a lot of richness, a lot of depth, a lot of gras, a lot of fatness? Or are you looking for something that is a little bit more lean, a little more sinewy, a little more, if you can look at some of the herbal tones that you're going to get, a little bit more presence from cooler vintages. So you're absolutely correct. So what I would say, the hot vintages, rhyme them right off real easy. 1995, 1997, 1998, 2002, 2005, 2007, 2010, 2012, 2016, 2020. Those are all the hot years. And in those years, we were able to make these wines that
you go to bed every night reciting that, or what?
You can double check. You double check with anybody. I got it right. It's just a thing that winemakers do. It's in our.
I know, it blows my mind every time. Shuan did the same thing to me with Riesling the other day. She just went off like 12, 13 numbers back to back, and I'm like, Really? Like, do you have a sheet behind the camera for that, or what?
Maybe we're just making it up. So,
Yeah,
in those
exactly.
years, those are hot, dry years that were more quintessential. What everybody believes is a quality vintage. Heat equals quality, and that's kind of a mindset that most people have. The hotter vintages, but that may not be the right metric of quality for, say, Riesling or for, say, Chardonnay. So for Bordeaux Reds or Cabernet Franc, we can say that the hotter vintages are better. But what I really enjoy, what I find to be probably the most rewarding, is taking a vintage like 2009 or a vintage like 2015. And these are sleeper hits. These are vintages that nobody expected to be great, but both of those years had wonderful. Hey there, Mira. Both of those years had wonderful falls. So if we can have a gorgeous fall, basically from September till November, if the weather can turn in those months, I can almost guarantee you we're going to get something remarkable in the bottle for you when you taste those wines from that vintage. We've also invested in something, Carl, that is called an optical sorter. And
Yes.
we were the very first winery in Canada to invest in this. It's about a $500,000 machine that allows us to take the grapes that we've harvested in the vineyard, passes them across an optical camera, a camera that takes a picture of the grapes as they're passing along this belt. It identifies the underripe berries and discards them through an air blast system. So I can sort 7 to 10 tons of grapes per hour, and I can, in essence, tune in the level of ripeness that I hope to have. I'll take every grape that we shoot out of the stream and I make rosé out of that. So we're not losing those grapes. But I call that sort of a vintage variation disruptor. And so in a year where it's a little bit cooler, I'll remove more grapes out of this process, more underripe grapes. But in a year, 2020 as an example, I took out maybe 1 or 2%. In a year like 2021, I was taking out 18 to 20%. And so what that helps us do is create the balance, and we can create a little bit more harmony from vintage to vintage, because the consumer, quite frankly, is not really overly enthusiastic about buying a wine like 2020 and saying, this is the most unbelievable wine we've ever had. Thank you so much. And then 2021 comes and it was a leaner year. They're going, whoa, what happened?
They're expecting the same result, right? They're expecting the same result with so many different challenges.
Exactly. And that's not something that I'm able to stand in front of them when they're about to buy the bottle of wine and explain it to them. So we invested in this technology as an opportunity for us to be able to balance out those vintage variations. And what we've been able to do is help other wineries as well in Ontario. One of the things that I hope that is written on my epitaph when I'm dead, I hope it writes, he helped everyone. And so we allow other wineries to bring their grapes to us, to that machine, and we will process their grapes for them and put it through in particular challenging vintages. So we're trying to do that as much as we can to help all the wineries of Ontario. Again, the rising tide lifts all ships. And so what we want to be able to do is help all the wineries with the struggles that we've had. And we're fortunate enough to be able to find a way to buy this machine. Nobody else, there's not a lot of other people that would have been able to justify spending $500,000 for a machine that you use for 6 weeks a year and then collects dust.
I would say, like, none of accountant will sign up a check for that.
My God.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense financially.
It took me years to justify that purchase. I tell you, it was a long haul.
When we're talking about the small farmers, like the small producer, the little guys, right?
Yeah.
And for Mira and I, that's what we're so passionate, especially when we start with someone, we do a feature like that with the little guys that I like to call them. They're they're the farmer, they're farming their vineyard, they're harvesting their grape, like themselves and their wives and their cousins, and they're making the wine, they're selling the wine, they're doing bleeding. Everything.
Yeah,
and
wine,
you know it. You were in these shoes at the beginning. Like you were like, it's so gratifying to see the growth of the little guys and see them succeed, especially after
we still try to maintain that personality or that persona, if you will. I would never say that we're a large winery by any stretch. We still do a lot of wines. For our wine club, as an example, we're doing 100-case bottlings of unique, special, innovative wines that nobody else gets, that only our wine club gets, and maybe we'll be able to include you guys in that at some point, and all of your wine club members. But we still hold on to that humble beginnings, where we're seeking to express the personalities of individual and unique places in our vineyards, and do this in 100 case lots, and to be able to share those with the people. And that keeps us humble. That keeps us thinking small. I never want to think big. I always want to think small.
And Brian, you know what? This is the best example of what we have this week. And it's when I taste the Pinot Meunier, the 2020 Pinot Meunier, single clone, single vineyard, or the Clone 76 Chardonnay unfine, unfiltered. Mm-hmm. These taste small batches of wine. This is in the profile. When you taste it, you smell it. These, like, they feel small batches of wine. You know these are special. There's a special attention in the process of these wines.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'd like to share with you and some of your members that are listening here today a really interesting story about our Pinot Meunier. You want to talk about a cross-country wine? That Pinot Meunier is remarkable. So when we were planting out our boutique vineyard in the mid-1990s, one of the things that we wanted to do was expand our sparkling wine production. The Chardonnay Clone 76 is right beside the Pinot Meunier. And we planted these grapes with the intention of expanding our sparkling production. Turns out the site that we planted the Pinot Meunier in produced only in cooler vintages great sparkling wine. So we began to see this trend that the sparkling wines are just a little too heavy, a little too intense. So I started making red wine from it. The very first vintage we did was a rosé in 2006, and then a red table wine in 2008. And we were looking at this again, as we're starting to make red wine, we're beginning to think, well, where else in Canada they're making a red table wine out of Pinot Meunier? There was one place in Prince Edward County, and the other place was where we sourced these grapes. And we sourced these grapes. If you know where Tantalus Winery is.
Yeah.
In Kelowna.
Absolutely. Just on the southeast Kelowna.
Exactly. So before Tantalus was Tantalus, it was called Pinot Reach, and it was run by a young lady named Sue Dulick. Sue Dulick is the daughter of Den and Pat Dulick, who owned the vineyard that Tantalus is now. They purchased all of the vineyards, Den and Pat Dulick. And Den and Pat Dulick are my sister's godparents.
Oh my God.
We have known the Dulick family forever and ever and ever. Rob Dulick lives in Calgary right now with his wife Nicole and their two boys. I know them, I love them, and we connect often. Pat Dulick still lives in the house just on the edge of the hillside, just below Tantalus. But those Pinot Meunier vines that we planted in 1997 came from the Dulick family. The buds came from their vineyards in the Okanagan Valley. And we attached them to rootstocks, planted them out, and then planted them 2 years later. And so there's a real cross-country connection with that Pinot Meunier, because it is born in the Okanagan Valley, like I was, and grew up in Ontario.
And you know what? You grew up in Summerland. You came to Summerland, like right here where we live. You went to Summerland High, and you know that Torn Heaven is a small winery in Summerland. They also produce 100% Pinot Meunier red.
Yeah, that used to be Schertzinger. I think that was called Schertzinger Estates before, was it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right here in Summerland.
So there's only a handful. So we have 8 acres. I'm sorry, we had 8 acres. I had to pull out about 2.5 acres of it this year. It was in a really low spot. It was wet. It wasn't performing particularly well. So we now have about 5 acres of Pinot Meunier for our Pinot Meunier red wine and sparkling portfolio. And I think that's probably the largest planting of Pinot Meunier in Canada.
Oh, you know, a member told me last week, he said, Carl, if you can describe me Pinot Meunier, how it tastes on the 100% varietal, I promise I'm going to buy a pack. And I sat down and I was sitting at a kitchen table and I had my nose in there, and it took me up like 45 minutes, and I look at Mira and I said, I think I know. It's a juicy Pinot Noir where it meets with the earthy Cabernet Franc. So
that's amazing. I love that. You're absolutely correct.
So she looked at me. She's like, "Huh? It's maybe a question. So what would you think of my assessment?"
I would tell you that's incredibly profound. I would say that you've probably nailed it. If you were to look at the consistency of Pinot Meunier year after year after year, one of the beauties is it ripens very early. And so we don't need a lot of heat units in order to be able to get the level of ripeness that you might need for, say, Cabernet Sauvignon or Syrah. So it usually ripens by mid-September or so. We reached 21, 22 and a half bricks. The acidity is still profound, so you're getting this freshness. And then we bring it in, we put it into neutral barrels in our cellars after 10 or 14 days on the skins, neutral barrels in our cellars, and it just rests there silently on the lees, developing some of those tertiary aromas. You're getting a little bit more of those slightly herbaceous notes that you typically would expect from Cabernet Franc, but you've got those bright, juicy, as you said, sort of raspberry, not really forest berry. It's not an intense berry fruit, but more raspberry.
And there's something a little rustic. There's something a little rustic, like the tobacco leaves or something that took me like, I don't know. And it took me like at least 45 minutes to an hour with my nose in there and spitting back and forth. And I was like, I had a ha-ha moment. I was like, I know, I got it.
So the way I've explained it, it's like the Riesling of red wine. Because there's always this juicy acidity that you're always going to get that in Pinot Meunier, and in fact in Germany they call it Schwarz Riesling. It's called it's grown in the area around Stuttgart, just north of Stuttgart. They call it Schwarz Riesling, black Riesling.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Hey, we have another wine this week, and it's just such a summer sipper. What's your connection with Sass Jordan? That's pretty cool that you guys have put that together, because, to be honest, I'm from up north Quebec. I'm from Chicoutimi, okay? Yeah, we like our rock and roll up. We like our rock and roll up there. And Sass Jordan, to me, I love Sass Jordan. And when I saw that on the first lineup, I was like, and I did a little bit more research. It's even on their website. When you go on Sass Jordan's website, you can see like the wines. So that's pretty cool. Where's the connections come from?
So Sass is actually from Quebec. She's from the Eastern Townships. And oddly enough, I chatted with Sass for 45 minutes today. We had a really wonderful conversation. So I first met Sass, I think, when was she doing Canadian Idol? I feel like that was 2009 or 2008, something like that. And I was doing a winemaker's dinner at a restaurant in Toronto. Turns out this winemaker's dinner was for a bunch of lawyers that had been golfing during the day. And by the time we got to the restaurant, they were trashed. Like this whole group of, and so we're doing the first course for this winemaker's dinner. And I realized I was getting nowhere. It was just a complete shit show. Sorry, am I allowed to swear? I'm allowed to swear. It was a complete shit show.
It's almost like you're telling yourself, what the fuck am I doing here?
What am I doing here? And so I said to the guy that organized this winemaker's dinner, I said, I'm done. Like, this isn't working. I hope you guys have fun, but there's no value for me being here. He says, you know what, you're right. Go sit at the bar and we'll bring you a meal and then have a glass of wine and then you can head home. So I sat at the bar, and we've got all these wines that we're pouring with the bartender that is there, and the server comes and brings me a meal, and the bartender said, do you mind if I pour these wines there's a lady at the end of the bar. She probably would like it. She's a really interesting lady. And so I said, yeah, by all means. I may as well try to tell somebody about Canadian wine or
someone is willing to.
So anyways, she tastes it and kind of screams, oh my God, this is the best Canadian wine I've ever had. Turns out it was Sass. Sass was there at this hotel after one of the tapings of Canadian Idol. She kind of comes over, sits beside me, and we struck up a wonderful friendship. She is a sweet, sweet lady. Her husband, Derek, is just the salt of the earth. So I've known them for years. They're dear, dear friends. And so Sass came to me a couple of years ago and said, Brian, I see some of these other people are doing interesting wines, and I wanted to expand the breadth of my brand a little bit. I'm kind of moving into a couple of different genres for music. I kind of want to break the mold a little bit. Do you know anybody who would be interested in making a wine for me? I'm like, Sass, what the fuck are you talking about? Do I know somebody who would be interested? I'll make your damn wine. Are you kidding me? So she's like, oh, that's amazing. So we went through the process and we made our first wine. I think it was 2016. And we've had a great deal of fun doing it. She comes down and we go through the blends together, and she's actually a really fantastic taster. She's very critical. And so we went through quite a number of variations before we came up with wines that she was happy with. And so anyways, it was just a whole ton of fun to do that. She's great. She's actually
that's such a cool.
just
That's
launching
such a cool story.
a new album in June. We're talking about a different thing that we're doing. She's heading to the Netherlands. She's going to be cranking up.
I saw that. I spent half an hour on their website this week, and like there's bitches in the title of their new album, and she's going overseas. Like, wow, and she doesn't age. Like, she's aging so well. Like, it feels like
she is gorgeous. But more importantly, like, yes, she is physically gorgeous, but she's a beautiful human being. She's just the sweetest, kindest lady. My wife Rebecca and I adore her and Derek, and we spent lots of time together. So they're wonderful. She truly is a great Canadian. We can be very, very proud of her.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brian, it's 6 o'clock. You've already been so gracious of your time.
Oh, really? Holy cow! Look at that.
I know. It's so cool. Mira, come on in. There you go. There you go.
Hey.
She has.
I can see my face so red. All the sun I got today. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Finally, the sun, hey?
Oh, it's been beautiful here for 3 days. I can show you my farmer stand there.
Awesome. Yeah, look at that.
There you go. There you go. Hey, okay. Well, before we talk about the wines, I like to ask that to pretty much like, anyway, are you a farmer or a winemaker?
Farmer, totally. Completely farmer.
There you go.
Yeah, there's no question about it. All of my time is spent in the vineyard. So if we have, when I see you in June, you're going to come in and spend some time out here in June, end of June, I think you said.
Yep.
You're going to come into this barrel cellar. You're going to taste some of our wines in the barrel cellar. You'll notice one thing that is slightly different here, and it's starting to be more of a trend, but we've been doing it for years. All of our barrels are neutral oak, which means we have no new oak barrels. I'm not interested in new oak flavors being integrated into our wines. What I put so much effort, so much thought, so much intent, and quite frankly, our vineyards are the most important feature of our wines. Not me, not the barrels that they age in. It's the vineyard. So all the work that we do in the vineyard, I want that to be showcased in the bottle and in the glass. I want people to taste that work. I want them to taste the place. I want them to taste the intent of those grapes. And so all of my effort is put in the vineyard. We bottled all week. So we've got a crew that came in and we're bottling 2,000 cases a day. And I am just not interested in spending any time on a bottling line. Nothing about being on a bottling line to me is an artistic expression of what we do. That's a
not
process.
even the sound, not even just that annoying sound of killing.
Not even so that's a process, and we have incredibly talented, dedicated people who are going to do that. But I'm in the vineyard while all those wines are being bottled. So through the élevage, through the aging of wines, I'm intimately involved in that process. Through harvest time, obviously on the crush pad, I'm in the vineyard on the crush pad, and we're ensuring that we're ushering the wines from the vineyard into the tanks and into the barrels in an appropriate way. But once those wines are in the tank and once they're in the barrels, my job is done. That's it. And I go back into the vineyard and those decisions are made. So I read once a really, really wonderful commentary by a gentleman named Clark Schmidt. He's from California. Said that the job of a winemaker is to render the soul of a place into liquid music. I'm going to repeat that. The role of a winemaker is to render the soul of a place into liquid music. And so that's my job. So I have to take the soul of our vineyard and translate that into music in the glass for you. And if I don't do that, I have failed. And another quote that I live by is that the vines love the sun, but more the shadow of their master. And so if I'm not in the vineyard, if I'm not present, these vines will not be responding to the way we want them to direct them. And so it's those two features are incredibly important for me. And I remember those every single day. And that's my mantra. And I go into our vineyards with that fervent belief that I am there to make great wines in our vineyard, because you cannot make great wine from bad grapes. It's impossible.
Yeah, I have a goosebump here. Hey, okay, do you know all of the rows in your vineyard, like row by row? It reminds me, he's famously from Ontario, Sal D'Angelo. Sal, I had like a 3.5-hour conversation with him at the vineyard last year, and every single row, he's telling me not only which grape, but how many, like the third plant of that row gives me every year 3 days, the understanding like, and he calls always himself a farmer, and this is my farm. It's not a winery. He's not a winemaker. He's a farmer, and he lives on the farm.
Yeah.
That is, I always think it's fascinating.
The intimate connection, the intimacy and the intimate connection that a wine grower has with his vines and the soil and the site. I know every single area in our vineyard where I'm potentially going to have problems, where I have to watch for potential risks. I have to understand each and every spot. Even within one row, there's different soil types from the beginning of the row to the end of the row. If I'm disking as something that I love to do, I put that disc in the ground, and the disc behaves differently at one end of the row to the other end of the row based on the density and the structure of the soil. And so you have to know each one of those little intricate details that is so unbelievably important. So yeah, I am a farmer. You called me vice president and winemaker at the beginning of this. Vice president, quite frankly, is just something that had to happen more for banking than anything else. Means nothing to me. Not interested in that title. Wine grower is probably what I should change that to.
Or vigneron. It's probably more like how I can describe you. And I think that truly taking care of the land and exactly like putting some music in a glass. Like, I don't know how you said it exactly, but that's what a vigneron does. And I think that's the term that it describes you the best. Ah, wow, what a great conversation. Brian, you're so generous. Thank you so much. Mira, I need to know what you think of that beauty here.
Okay,
which one did you pour in her glass?
It's the 2016 Reserve Cabernet.
Oh, yeah, the Reserve, nice.
So
somebody named Melita just came up on the screen. Melita, thank you for watching. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Melita is she's I'll post often on our Facebook page, and I know that she opened that very special bottle last weekend.
Hey, look at that. There's Jeff. Hey, Jeff, I have to talk to you. We're doing the Cool Climate Symposium here in July, and I'm doing one of the talks on Cab Franc, and I need to talk to you about some of your insights into Cab Franc in BC. So I'm going to give you a call in the next couple of days. Jeff is on there. Jeff is amazing. I love him. Jeff.
Brian, I have to tell you, I am a Chardonnay junkie. My favorite Chardonnay from the Okanagan in the last couple of years, it's the Original Vines Mount Bushri Chardonnay. Yeah. Since Jeff took over Mount Bushri wine program, the level, like what they're delivering now, it's absolutely spectacular. Their Syrah, Jeff is doing an outstanding job. I just love what he's doing.
Is the work ethic of a horse and the soul of a poet. He's amazing. I love him.
Amazing.
I tried to recruit him to come and taste Chardonnay with me in 2 weeks so he can be on my panel. Nice. So, Brian, thank you so very much, and good luck with the new project in Nova Scotia. Good luck with everything, and I truly hope that we can connect when I'm down there at the end of June.
Yeah, we will indeed.
Okay,
safe travels, everyone. Thank you very much. Be well.
Thank you so much, Brian. We really appreciate your time.
Okay,
cheers.
Thank you.
Your wines, Brian, because holy smokes, Carl Boucher. Did you already talk about this wine?
I did not. I didn't have time to talk about the wine. I'm talking with one of the most interesting person, wine person in the whole darn freaking country. And you asked me if I talk about the wine. No, I didn't. I was just like soaked in that conversation. I had like goosebumps for half an hour because like I'm so transported. Like I feel like I'm levitating right now.
That is awesome. That is
so cool. So darn cool. You know, sometimes like you ask yourself, do I do the right thing? That these kind of moments are, wow, yes.
This is a wow moment. It is really special. And this wine that we're tasting, like this is the best part, is we get to talk about what he's saying, and then it's true. Like this is music in a glass. This is gorgeous.
Oh, and this is rock and roll. This is rock and roll, baby. This is there's some weight in there. There's some this is the bass. The bass drum is going to. It's rich. It's dense. It's expressive. This is like 1980s rock and roll, or this is Saz Jordan at her best when she goes on and hard. So this is
beautiful texture and balance to it all. That it's like
texture and richness. texture and richness. And to me, this is the length at the end, like the length at the finish. There's the spice, there's the tobacco, there's the licorice, but there's also some dirt coming into that as well. But soft, smooth.
This is a sexy date in like a collectible car.
Yeah,
you know, we talked about that one time. Like this is like the classic, but not you know, in a tuxedo, with someone in a, you know, a little bit more like maybe an upscale suit with like crazy socks or crazy running shoes.
Yeah. You know, with the funky tie and like the pocket square coming out, and not freshly shaved. It's something like with personality. This is filled with personality. That there's richness, there's depth, there's concentration. I absolutely love that wine.
When you talk about a scent of place and a wine transporting you somewhere, this is like that. This is, to me, it's like, I don't know, it's like eating something from an exotic land. Like it's amazing.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of spice like that. Like there's more than pepper at the end. There's a little bit of cinnamon. There's those like mushroom duxelle.
Yannick's talking about accommodations for June barbecue. Yannick, we'll try and give you a call tomorrow. We can probably help. We have a scoped out different routes of going about it. But
yes, absolutely. Can't wait to meet you in person, Yannick. It's going to be pretty darn cool. That's awesome. And also meet with Brian. Do we need to put that in our calendar? There has to be a visit. I'm not leaving Niagara without having a walk in Brian's vineyard with Brian. I refuse to go to Niagara and not do that.
He might kick us out because we'll probably be with the kids. After half an hour, they'll be like, "Get out of here, you guys."
At least I will have half an hour.
Yes, well, I'm writing it down. Go to Vineland.
I have to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Amazing.
Wow. You know what? We have baseball. The baseball games start in 18 minutes. So we'll have to go very soon. It's just too bad. I'm on a hype right now. I'm just on a high adrenaline rush. I'm so pumped right now. Wow. Amazing conversation. That Marcel told me, Carl, you'll shit your pants after an hour conversation with Brian Schmidt. I'm telling you. And he's been bugging me all week. He texted me 3 times. Can't wait for you to have that conversation. Can't wait for you to have that conversation. And yeah. Woo! Amazing. 92. Good. 92 points here.
Yes.
At least. I need to sit down.
Scale, we disagree on the mirror scale. I don't know if it's just after this amazing conversation you get really emotional, but to me, this is a lot more than that. And what the crazy part is, when I first smelled it, I loved the aromas. Okay. And this is for those of you that don't know, I don't know much about wine. I didn't even know what Carl does for a living until we had to be in a house together like 24 hours a day during the pandemic. And then I found out what he does and I'm like, this is kind of cool. So let me learn about these wines. But from the aromas, I was like, oh yes, I get the Cab Franc, and Cab Franc is my least favorite grape I've discovered. But I taste it. And Daryl's on. Daryl doesn't like Cab Franc either, but Daryl.
No. Daryl likes Cab Franc. That's not true. Daryl likes Cab Franc. He doesn't like the green pepper, the Parisienne in the Cab Franc. Okay. This has absolutely zero, none whatsoever. This is fully ripe. This is a hot vintage, right? Warm vintage, fully ripe. None of the green pepper.
There is nothing that I don't normally adore about Cab Franc in this glass. This is like
this is on cocoa. This is cocoa, dark chocolate, tobacco leaf, ripe fruit. So
yeah. So Daryl, you do have to come by, even if you have to put a tent out. And my gosh, we have to meet. We've been chatting every Wednesday for like 2 years now. So
Oh, he's gonna meet us. He's gonna meet us on the 23rd, on the 24th. Though I have a feeling that he's gonna be meeting us in Ontario.
Oh yeah, or maybe for the baseball game in Toronto on Carl's birthday on the 27th.
Speaking about baseball, the game's starting in 15 minutes. We need to get there.
Okay, so tell us in a nutshell what else we need to know about the wines this week.
So it's Vineland Estate Weeks. So what else do we need to? We have the value wine of the year in that pack, without the shadow of a doubt. $14.95 for the Oak Chardonnay. There's no wine in the country who delivers that quality for $14.95. Forget about it. This is impossible. This is my value wine of the year. Fantastic. And the cool thing is, it's not only Chardonnay, it's 85 Chard, 15% Rieslings. So there's a green apple, citrusy finish on that wine, a little bit flinty. It brings a super personality of that wine. So this, number one. Number two, there's 2 Pinot Meunier. If you listened a little bit earlier, we have a 10-minute conversation about the Meunier. So 100% varietal red, who is, to me, unique, special. And when people ask me to describe Meunier, I'm going with juicy, where juicy Pinot Noir meet with earthy Cabernet Franc. That's what you can expect. A little bit of rusticity here. It's rustic. There's a little greeny tannin, but it's beautiful. It's intriguing. It's fun. The rock star of that wine with that reserve that we just tasted, this is the other reserve, the reserve Pinot Meunier Rosé Sparkling. That is fun, that it's cool, that is bright. Even if there's 20 grams of residual sugar, there's a bright acidity. Like Brian was mentioning, it's an early ripening grape. So you can pull it out off the vines with full ripeness early, so you preserve that bright acidity. It allows you to crank up the residual sugar a little bit more, so you have that wonderful balance, acidity, residual sugar. There's lees in there. It's rich, it's bright, it's refreshing. This is the Bushri Rosé bubbles for the summer at our house here by the lake. Fantastic. And there's one, that I'm a Chardonnay junkie. You know about it. You know that. The boutique Clone 76 Meunier Chard, unfiltered. It's a borderline geeky, but Jesus Christ, I love it. I love it. I could have spent 2 days geeking out on that bottle of wine. Love it.
Special.
So here we go. So this is a little bit of my Rockstar House Star. So yeah.
Yes, amazing stuff. So
150. Oh yeah, did we talk about the shipping? Free freaking shipping.
That is the best part. This is rarer and rarer. We actually have a conversation tomorrow at 6 a.m. To talk with someone who's hoping to change some of the ways shipping works for wine. And they're doing it in Ontario. Hopefully we can bring it across the country. But barring that, what this guy's doing, it's pretty rare now to get free shipping direct from the winery. Except
absolutely. So this week, like after a couple of weeks of $35, $40, $45 cross-country shipping charge, free. So get on it. The offer ends tomorrow night. Yeah, Vineland Estates Winery, Brian Schmidt. This is just so much fun tasting what they have. And like people said, some people would say, oh, they're a big producer. They're not big producer. We're featuring here some wines like 400 cases production. Some of the stuff that he does is 180 cases. So he does a lot of small batch wine with outstanding personality. So get on it until tomorrow night.
Now that was a different one I was looking at, but yeah, there are some smaller 290. That's what I was looking at. The boutique Chardonnay is 290 cases.
I need to head out to the Diamond. We're playing baseball tonight.
You better. Okay, last thing. Anyone who is thinking about a quick little getaway to wine country, guys, come see us June 3rd. It's a Friday night. If you can stretch your weekend a little further, come out on the Thursday. We're going to do some touring with a small group. This is out in the Okanagan, and we will be in Niagara end of June, June 24th. But this is June 3rd at our Members' Choice #1 BC Winery for 2021, Black Market. We're doing a very special dinner in the vineyard with some very special wines. It is a private event for that reason, because in BC, otherwise we wouldn't be able to bring things out of people's private cellars and things like that.
And we have very special guests as well.
The Bellaterra crew is coming from Ontario to join us in BC, and then vice versa. When we go to Ontario, the Black Market crew is going to meet us at Bellaterra. So these are very special events. Stefan, you're coming to the 24th. That's awesome. We're going to have the sign-up link pretty soon for that, and it's going to be epic. So cool. Yes. All right. So if you're anywhere close to Cullinan, BC on June 3rd, I hope you can stop by.
This has the richness of a big BC South Okanagan wine. This has the depth, the richness. Wow. Yeah, this is 2016 in a nutshell. I need to sit down tonight and do some tasting notes and put a score on, but it's definitely 92 plus. I'm edging maybe a little higher than that. Spectacular wine, spectacular lineup. I love Brian Schmidt, Vigneron, his new title. So yes, we're off to a baseball game. So Canadian wine lovers, Carl's Wine Club members, Mira Boucher, thank you for another great evening. Maybe check us out tomorrow. We might have a little impromptu live. I just received a tank sample from one of our favorite winery in Canada. We might taste that live tomorrow. We might just pop on your screen at some point. But
that's going to be
have a good evening, all. I'll talk to you very soon. And also Chardonnay Day, World Chardonnay Day, next Saturday, not this weekend, the following one.
The 21st.
Yes, we are setting up something big. The biggest viewing party in the world.
For Chardonnay Day. Yeah.
World Chardonnay Day, second edition. So, okay, we'll see you next time. Take care.
World Chardonnay